This obviously rolls from infancy, parents into preschool, school, secondary school. What's happening to children when they get into school and they are first faced with test scores and assessment and structure? You get to school at this time and no, you can't do that. And the teacher, like, how much of this is laid at the feet of parents and how much of this is laid at the feet of the education system?
Yeah, it's a kind of it is a mix. The sort of the normal human progression is up until age 6, 7, maybe even 8. Um, there's really no value at all to homework or having too much structure. By 8, 9, 10, they can really learn, to fit in, to conform. But the early grade, especially kindergarten and first grade here in the US, there's really very little evidence that they benefit from being pushed to read faster or to learn math faster. We have this naive idea that if they start learning multiplication in kindergarten, they will end up in high school further ahead. It's kind of a naive notion of, we'll give them a head start and they'll end up further ahead, but that's not true. In Scandinavia, especially Finland, where they don't really start kids until age 7, they don't really do any academic stuff until age 7, and their kids are among the best in the world in all these academic measures. So I guess I would say at a certain point, yeah, they do need to learn all that stuff. They do need to be self-regulating, and if they're going to fit into a free market capitalist economy and be functioning people and be prosperous, they need all those skills. But that doesn't mean you have to really start them very strictly early on. What kids need in kindergarten and first grade is especially a lot more play than we give them. We need to really back off on the homework and the heavy academics in kindergarten and first grade, is my opinion.
What's happening to test scores with regards to students?
So there's a global measure of test scores around the world. That's PISA, the Program for International Something Assessment. Scholastic, I suppose. And with PISA, what we see is that scores were going up from the 90s. I think it started in the 90s. Scores were sort of going slowly up from the 90s to the 2012 assessment. It's every 3 years. And beginning at the 2012 assessment, some of them start to go down. And then they go down further in the most recent. And everybody points to that and says, oh, COVID. Wow, COVID was so terrible. And it was. It was terrible that we took kids out of school. It was terrible that we took kids who weren't in any danger and said, you don't get to go to school because what if you bring home the virus to an adult? And so it's true that COVID, being out of school did hurt test scores. But what people are only just beginning to realize, when you look at those graphs, it didn't start with COVID. It started when kids and everybody got on phones around 2012. In America, we have the NAEP, N-A-E-P, National Assessment of Educational Progress. It's called the Nation's Report Card. Same thing. There we have data back from the 70s. So we were making progress. Like kids literally, in 4th or 8th grade, whenever they measure it, kids literally were learning more about math, science, and better and reading. There was progress for decades, slow but steady progress until 2012. And then it begins to reverse. And yes, it reverses even more during COVID, but the reversal started around 2012. So I think the main thing we should be focusing on here is phones in schools. We'll talk more about what phones are doing to all of us, but the idea that a child has access, like a seventh grader has a smartphone in their pocket, they're going to text. If the phone is available, someone is texting. And if someone is texting or group texting or posting on Instagram, then everyone has to be checking. Otherwise, at lunch, they're going to be the one who doesn't know the thing that happened during third period. So once kids, around 2012 is when we get the phone-based childhood. That's roughly when teens switch from flip phones to smartphones, right around then. As soon as that happens, they're not paying as much attention in school. They're not learning enough. They're not learning as much as they did. They're not paying as much attention to each other, and they start getting lonelier. So after 2012, our kids are getting stupider and lonelier. And I think a lot of it, not all, but a lot of it is because of the phone.
What was that article that you tweeted about Gen Z reading books for pleasure or them not doing it?
Yes. So Jean Twenge, who's been fantastic, she was one of the first to really call attention to this in 2017, that something big is happening to our kids. And Gene is a master of these 4 giant data sets that we have in America, long-running surveys monitoring the future, goes back to the 1970s. Every year they interview large samples of 12th graders, 10th graders, and 8th graders. And so we have decades of data. And one of the questions they ask a lot of questions. One of them is, how often do you read books for pleasure, or have you read a book for pleasure in the last month? I can't remember the exact timing. And what Gene shows is that the number who have read no books, I think that's how it is. Like, how many of you read, 0 in the last year for pleasure, or 1 to 3, or 5 to 10. The number who have read 0 books in the last year has been going up for a while. It didn't start in 2012. As kids are watching more television, cable TV, going on the internet, book reading has been declining, being replaced by other screens. That's been going on for a long time. But it accelerates after 2012 because, again, once you have a smartphone and you have social media, which is going to suck up all of your time, there is no limit to how much you need to consume or post or monitor. So life on a smartphone, what I'm calling the phone-based childhood, takes up so much time. There is no time for hobbies or reading or anything. And so Gene shows these dramatic graphs of, the number who never read a book, those go up, and the number of books people read on average goes down. We have a nation of young people who have read very, very few books.